This channel has just reached 1,000 subscribers, and to celebrate, I'm making this series of 5 videos, each episode covering a different one of those fabulous Thunderbird machines. And since this is episode 3, I'll let you all have a little competition amongst yourselves in the comments section, so you can guess first which Thunderbird I'm covering today. And man, this is a cool one. And before we begin properly, if you haven't seen the last episode, I'll put a link to it up there for you. So, Thunderbird 3, International Rescue's very own rocket, piloted mostly by Alan Tracy, and probably the most outrageous thing in Thunderbirds. And it's the only Thunderbird machine to be given exact sizes in the episode Give or Take a Million. And it's from this that we learned that it weighs 562 tonnes. It's 287 feet long, and it's 80 foot wide at its widest point, which would be the engine nacelles. It's got unlimited range and is powered by an atomic fusion reactor. This feeds 3 main engines for launch and landings, and an advanced ion propulsion system, and is mainly piloted in the series by Alan Tracy, although we are given to understand that he swaps over each month with his big brother John. His co-pilot though will always be his elder brother Scott, and occasionally TinTin will pop up as well for a ride. More about her later. Now, although John is listed officially as the other pilot for Thunderbird 3, we only ever see him flying it once. As I mentioned in my Thunderbird 5 episode, John just wasn't popular with Jerry Anderson, hence he was mostly relegated to the space station. We also get to see Virgil flying it once as well, leaving my favourite Tracy brother Gordon as the only one that's never flown it. Although in universe this would be logical because Gordon trained as an aquanaut and he only completed his astronaut training just prior to joining International Rescue. But before we go any further, please hit the like and subscribe button because that really helps the channel out. Also, you can now follow me on Twitter/X, where you'll be able to partake in such gems as my harassment campaign against Elon Musk until he finally caves in and lets me rename one of his Starlink satellites. I want to call it Sid. And I'm also on Facebook. I'll put the links in the description. So as I've been making these episodes, I've also been doing a little bit of a deep dive on each of the Tracy brothers. So, Alan, born on the 12th of March 2044, making him the youngest of the Tracy brothers. And boy does that show. Like all of his brothers, he's named after a real Mercury 7 astronaut, and in his case, it's Alan Shepard. So, Alan is the blonde-haired, baby-faced, romantic Tracy brother, who apparently, just like his namesake, enjoys a round of golf on the moon. So Alan studied at Harvard University, and in his brief time there, he designed and built his own rocket, which to the horror of his tutors, he tried to fly himself. And in doing so, the rocket immediately flew off course, broke every window on the campus, and nearly killed Alan. So, as you can imagine, his dad was not happy. So Jeff immediately pulled him out of school and had him fast-tracked into astronaut training as a means of channeling his more reckless impulses. This was all very much to Alan's chagrin, shall we say, because at that point he was sort of leading a playboy lifestyle as one of the world's foremost racing drivers. Although it does have to be said that Alan is quite a successful astronaut, which sort of bears out Jeff's faith in him a little bit. Alan is a keen archaeologist, and he's also fascinated with geology, and as such will take long, lonely walks around Tracy Island, fascinated by all the different rocks and potholes and things that he can discover. But as I said, he's the most romantic of the Tracy brothers, and he is in pursuit of TinTin, in what has to be one of the most unclear and complicated relationships ever in children's television. Are they on, are they off? I don't know. Either way, he is a green-eyed monster. And TinTin don't make it any easier for herself neither, because she shows zero fidelity. Because we know from dialogue in the episode Edge of Impact that she has admirers that like to visit her on the island, pretty frequently as well by the sounds of it. She gushes over Eddie Houseman in the episode End of the Road, and gets right stuck into it with Kaz Carnaby in the episode The Cham Cham. And it's often Grandma Tracy as well that she sort of connives to get these two back together again. But to make it worse for Alan, TinTin seems to go for like the complete opposite of him. She likes a tall, dark stranger who's a bit of a bad boy. And unfortunately for Alan, she never seems to go for young, blonde, heroic athletes. Although, again, for all of that, Alan seems to fancy Lady Penelope as well. And then says in the film Thunderbird 6 that his life is far too dangerous and complicated to share it with anybody. Although this could have been Alan just trying to sound a bit more mature and a bit more sophisticated, because at this point they're on Skyship 1 and both TinTin and Lady Penelope are flirting outrageously with Captain Foster, as is their God-given right to do so as well, I hasten to add. So yes, are they on, are they off? I don't know. But what I do know is this: Alan deeply loves TinTin. So Alan is immature, impetuous, spoiled and jealous, as well as being quick to temper. He's also brave, he's also enthusiastic, he's also loving, he's very romantic and has a real desire to prove himself. Now, I mentioned in my last episode that Gordon Tracy is my favourite of all the brothers, and I still stick by that. But Alan Tracy, despite my harsh words about him, is still my second favourite. And the reason for that is simple. There's a lot going on with Alan. He's the only character to get any real development throughout the show. He's the only character to show any real romantic interest in another character, although there was a lot of tension between Parker and Lady Penelope. Alan is possibly the only real character in the film Thunderbirds Are Go. He is one of only 3 Tracy brothers to take a life, having unalived 3 people in the film Thunderbird 6, but he is the Tracy brother with the most potential. So it's with all this in mind that a lot of things about Alan start to make sense. So think about it, you're his dad. You see this young man in front of you with all this potential, but he's still quite immature. He's not fully adulted yet. And most of all, out of all 5 of your kids, he's the one that most reminds you of yourself when you were that age. Well, what do you do as a father then in this case? Well, you let Alan be part of the setup. You make him part of the team. But he's apprenticed to his 4 older brothers, because each of them have got so much to teach him. And you make some very practical choices as well. For instance, the sharing agreement with Thunderbird 5. On a surface level, yes, this is because John and Alan are the most competent astronauts. But the side effect is this: you keep Alan out of trouble for 6 months of the year, and when Alan's not on the station, he goes into a supporting role. You let him be the chief pilot of Thunderbird 3, because again, yes, he's the most qualified astronaut along with his brother John, but you do this because in reality, Thunderbird 3 is the least used Thunderbird machine. And even in that case, you send Scott along to keep an eye on him. And it's for this reason that, well, all the really dangerous missions, the ones with the highest stakes, well, that's Scott and Virgil, the most competent and the most mature of the Tracy brothers. Yet at the same time, he is, as I said, apprenticed to them, so he will be there, but you never see him driving any of the real Gucci kit, do you? But he's there nonetheless to learn. I think there's something going on with Alan's sash as well. Each of the Tracy brothers has got their own unique colour. Scott is blue, for instance. John's purple, it looks pretty cool. Gordon's orange. Perhaps most iconically, Virgil is yellow, but Alan's is white. Now, I'm not suggesting that in universe there is actually any significance to the colour schemes, but I think Alan's off-white sash is symbolic, and it's all down to his potential. He has the potential to be anything, but we just don't know what that potential is yet. He could mature and his sash could be any colour, but at the moment, he's still growing, so his sash is white. And when viewed through this lens, the film Thunderbirds Are Go starts to make real sense. Yes, I did mention in my previous episode that Alan acts really bratty in that film, but I was using that scene to highlight one of Gordon's virtues, because in actual fact, Alan's got a real character arc in that film. He goes from being this bratty, impetuous toe rag of a kid to, at the end of the film, finally reaching adulthood, at least in the eyes of his family, where he is hailed as the hero of the day, because throughout the film he's learning. He's finally getting what it takes to be a Tracy brother, to be a real hero in international rescue. And by the end of it, he is courageous, he is trustworthy, he is mature, he is cool-headed. Alan saves the day by working in a team with all of his brothers. And I have to admit, as viewers, our patience is really rewarded here, because we get what is hands down one of the greatest action sequences and one of the most thrilling moments ever made for a children's film. So I hope I have rehabilitated Alan a little bit for you. Back in the real world though for a minute, originally Alan was voiced by Ray Barrett, who also provided the voice of John Tracy and literally dozens of other Thunderbirds characters. But the voice was recast and Matt Zimmerman took over the role, and he just owns it. He got the part because behind the scenes it was a mess. They just couldn't find a voice actor that could do the role properly. Nothing was fitting for him. Until one day the actor David Holliday, who voices Virgil in the series, he was talking to Sylvia Anderson and he was like, look, I got a guy and I think he'll be good for the role. At this point she's a little bit frustrated and a little bit cynical, but she's like, yeah, bring him in, we'll audition him. And when he walked into the room, she looked at him and she was like, don't say a word, you're perfect. If only you had blonde hair. And then she asked him just to speak to her in his normal accent. So he turns around and he's like, hello, I'm Matt Zimmerman from Detroit, Michigan. And Sylvia was just like, yeah, that's it. That's the voice. Now, I've mentioned before in a previous episode that often the character designs were based on real actors, with John, for instance, looking like Charlton Heston. Well, Alan was based on Robert Reed. Yep, Alan is based on Mike Brady. But what about Thunderbird 3? I mean, obviously that is what you've clicked on this video for, not some insane Cockney hooligan performing a character assassination on a beloved childhood character. Well, in universe, Thunderbird 3 was designed by chief engineer and absolute genius, Brains, and was constructed under conditions of absolute top secrecy deep in the bowels of Tracy Aerospace. And as I mentioned before in my last episode, I love a Thunderbird's launch sequence. But for something as big and loud and as just gorgeous to look at as Thunderbird 3, for some reason its launch sequence is actually the most tame and the least dynamic. So how do we launch Thunderbird 3 then? Well, Alan and Scott and whoever else may be piloting it will be seated in the couch in the family room of the Tracy family villa. Jeff then activates a switch on his desk, which causes the entire couch and its occupant to descend into a series of tunnels beneath Tracy Island. They will traverse these tunnels until they reach Thunderbird 3's launch silo, and from there, the couch, puppets and all, will be inserted directly up the rear end of Thunderbird 3. At this point, the crew will take their positions, Alan will don his uniform, and the launch will take place. And this is spectacular, because the launch silo is placed underneath the roundhouse, so Thunderbird 3 will blast off through the hole in the middle of the roundhouse. And you often get this really good camera angle on it as well. It will be very evocative of those 1960s Apollo rockets, that iconic bit of film where the Saturn V rocket is staging and it falls away from the camera to reveal planet Earth. Well, on Thunderbird 3, you sort of get that. You get an image of just one of the rocket motors blasting as it moves away from the Earth, and you get this really sort of surreal, spacey, sci-fi music going with it as the Earth gets smaller and smaller. Now, I need to talk about the roundhouse for a moment. Now, the reason the roundhouse is there is simple. It's because it makes the whole scene a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more interesting to look at. And in universe, it serves as like a guest house. And yes, it is round because it needs to let Thunderbird 3 pass through it. And it is called the roundhouse because it is round. But why not the circle house? Why isn't it called the guest house? Why is it always referred to as the roundhouse? Well, yeah, it rolls off the tongue nice and easy. But I think there's something a little bit cooler at play here. So if you was a creative and you was living in London in the 1960s, the chances are you was hanging out in some of the coolest venues and you was listening to the coolest bands playing at the coolest venue. And one of those venues just happened to be an old railway shed in Camden, and it contained a turntable. It was round and it was called the Roundhouse. So I think somebody connected with the production of Thunderbirds had been to the Roundhouse more than once. And I think behind the scenes, on the down low, it was named after one of the coolest venues in the world. And I think that's symbolic as well for Alan's character, because if you want to be cool, well, you've got to pass through the coolest venue, ain't you? So Jerry Anderson's been quite clear about this, and on more than one occasion he has stated that he feels that, well, Thunderbird 3 is the most boring of the Thunderbird machines. Well, boring is too strong a word. Thunderbird 3 is far from boring. It has its limitations, and yes, its utility is certainly limited, and it is most often seen ferrying John or Alan back and forth between the space station, but it would be unfair to describe it as boring. Because, well, for one thing, it's a rocket, and therefore it is impossible for it to be boring. And then add to that the fact that it is a reusable single-stage to orbit rocket equipped with an ion drive with a theoretically unlimited range, and that, to be quite honest with you, if you had a garden big enough you could park it in it. Describing it as boring is a little bit excessive. But now that we know that Jerry Anderson felt that it was a little bit dull, we can understand why the episodes that it appears in are anything but dull. So we're left waiting until episode 11 of Thunderbirds before Thunderbird 3 gets a proper outing in the episode Sun Probe. So on the surface, Sun Probe could have been one of the more boring episodes of Thunderbirds because the pace is quite slow and there ain't that much action. But what they do is they use this slower pace to build up the tension, to ratchet up the drama and give the episode a real atmosphere. This is paired with just a fantastic musical score, probably the best of any Thunderbirds episode. They use everything they know to draw you into this episode, from your emotional investment with the characters to your childhood joy at seeing 2 rocket launches in a single episode. And on the technical level, it's brilliant. These puppets look like they are genuinely sweating. And it's not just from the heat of the sun, because yes, Thunderbird 3 crew are about to plummet into the sun, but it's all the other characters as well. Everyone back on Earth, even Virgil and Brains up on the Himalayas, they all look physically more tense than they would normally do. So in my last episode, I mentioned that each Thunderbird machine becomes an avatar for its pilot, and it reflects their personalities. And Thunderbird 3 is no different. It is loud, fast, brash, aggressive, red or orange, I don't know. It is bloody immature and normally relegated to rear echelon duties, just like Alan. And also bear in mind what I said earlier on about Alan, when I basically said he's a Tracy brother, but he's not quite ready yet, and as such he's being mentored by his brothers. So, like I said, this is a slow burner of an episode with loads going on. And just as you think you're safe, just as you think this is a normal Thunderbirds episode, if a little bit slow, they throw you a real curveball. Because in the act of saving the Sun Probe and its crew, Thunderbird 3 is now in danger. It is hurtling into the sun, and nobody can work out how to save them until they finally work out that they can use the robot that Brains has been working on to calculate the mathematical formulas needed so they can use Thunderbird 2's transmitter to save Thunderbird 3. Just as an aside from that, something really subtle's going on there, because you'll recognise Brayman, the robot, from the episode before. It was guarding a vault in the episode 30 Minutes Afternoon. So it seems like in universe, the Thunderbirds have only gone and nicked one, ain't they? Just so Brains can do his Frankenstein experiments on it. He's probably trying to create a girlfriend or something. But anyway, what this episode is doing, very subtly, is that it's giving us a metaphor for Alan and his character arc. Thunderbird 3, well, that's just an avatar for Alan. And it's saying, yes, Alan is courageous and he's nearly ready, but he still needs to rely on his brothers. He needs to learn to trust his family. He still needs to learn to work as a team. And if that team is not there to support him, or he doesn't use it, he's going to get himself and the people that he loves into some very hot water. But ultimately, he will make it, because he will learn from this and he will continue to grow. And then he will make it. So those are the types of episodes we get with Thunderbird 3. And I think the messaging is just so great. Remember, this is a children's programme. These stories always have a moral. And the moral here is this. Yes, we may be your heroes. And one day, you'll be a hero too. But it's not easy. You need to be courageous. You need to be smart. You need to communicate. You need to love each other. You need to be patient. You must listen to your parents and you must listen to your teachers, because they really do want what's best for you. And if you do all that, if you put the work in now, then one day, just like Alan and just like Thunderbird 3, even the sky won't be the limit for you. And for all of those reasons, yet again, Thunderbirds is the greatest children's programme of all time. Anyway, as I always say, this is just a personal view. That's what this channel is all about. Let me know in the comments what you think. Please remember to hit the like and subscribe button, and hopefully I'll see you again in the next episode, because that's going to be a right good one, because it's about Thunderbird 2.
Whoa. sounds like the end of the world. Flames dancing wild